Did you know that in Eminescu's poems, there are hints of the theory of relativity, that there are suggestions of concepts from quantum mechanics, that Eminescu's manuscripts contain Einstein's famous formula, E equals mc squared? Could Eminescu have discovered the theory of relativity before Einstein? Let's clear up the mystery. Moon, mistress of the sea, you glide over wanderers and darken life's troubled thoughts. Thousands of deserts sparkle under your light, maiden, and so many forests hide the shine of springs in their shadows. Over how many thousands of waves does your rule pass when you float over the moving seas? Loneliness. Every time I listen to these verses, I get a shiver. It's like Eminescu lived in me and knows my deepest thoughts and dreams. If only he had been with me in La Puchata, the village where I grew up. If only he had seen the moon there above the flowing Serna. If only he had looked from afar at the lights of the houses in Carteye, the village across the Cerna. If only he had seen the moon shining above the forest on the hill. If only he had discovered the hidden springs of the forest too. There, where the water freezes in winter and the trees seem to grow straight out of the ice. Eminescu is my brother, your brother, the brother of all of us who speak and understand the Romanian language. A brother who not only mastered the Romanian language to perfection, but also one who was tormented by our fundamental questions. What kind of world do we live in? Where are we going? To understand the cosmic hour, Eminescu turned not only to history or philosophy, but also to science. You know this too, since you often bring me Eminescu verses and say, look, Christian Pressura, doesn't this verse describe it? Time dilation, as Einstein discovered it. The poem La Steaua does not contain the theory of light described by Einstein. Could Eminescu have discovered Einstein's theory several decades before him? A few years ago, the question took a dramatic turn when a physics professor pointed out that a manuscript by Eminescu contains Einstein's famous formula E equals mc squared. I checked, and indeed that's exactly how it is. I was able to see that myself with my own eyes in the manuscript, and I was amazed. What is going on? How many of his intuitions precede the theory of relativity? So I set out on a search, the story of which you can find here. What I immediately noticed was Eminescu's respect for scientists, for teachers, for those who seek and bring knowledge. Let's read, for example, in letter 1. And Kolu, the old teacher, with his coat worn at the elbows, keeps calculating endlessly, over and over again. And further on, just as Atlas in ancient times held up the sky on his shoulder, so he supports the world and eternity in a number. This is how Eminescu, like a true student of Pythagoras' school, understands the value of numbers. He knows what the essence of scientific knowledge is, mathematics. Without mathematics, there is no physics, chemistry, or biology. Or, to quote Einstein, pure mathematics is, in its own way, the poetry of logical ideas. That is why Eminescu diligently sought scientific information. The traces of his search can be found in his poems, such as the following verses from the poem, The Starless Prince. Just as God encompasses with his heavenly life the distant stars, time and space, and the unseen atom, so too is he, the soul, contained within all things. Thus you will be greater than your far-reaching thought. The unseen atom that Eminescu refers to is indirect evidence of his attendance at the lectures of the great physicist Ludwig Boltzmann while he was in Vienna. Yes, at that time no one had proven the existence of atoms, and Boltzmann made it his life's purpose to do so. Unfortunately, Eminescu was among the few who believed him. Later, Boltzmann had a sad death before his own contribution was recognized by the scientific community. Only Albert Einstein in 1905 proved beyond any doubt the existence of atoms, and Boltzmann's contribution was recognized. And we come again to Einstein, the discoverer of the theory of relativity. Many believe that Einstein's theory can be found in Eminescu's poetry. To the star, to the star that has risen. It's such a long journey that it took thousands of years for the light to reach us. beautiful and true. Still, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but the lyrics above have nothing to do with Einstein's theory of relativity, only with the finite speed of light. However, this was already known and measured 150 years before Eminescu by the Danish physicist Ole Romer. In fact, Romer actually used the delay of light rays to calculate the speed of light when he observed the satellites of the planet Jupiter with a telescope. So Eminescu knew about the effect of the delay of light. His great achievement is to masterfully put it into verse when he talks about a star. Maybe it faded long ago, traveling through blue distances, and we're just now seeing its light. The image of the slowly dying star in the sky rises. It existed since it was no longer seen. Today we see it and it is not. How beautifully said? Today we see it and it is not. If you followed the news, this can actually happen today in the sky. Thus, in the constellation Orion, there is a reddish star by the name of Betelgeuse. You can see it with the naked eye too. It's easy to recognize. It's a red supergiant that is known to explode and then disappear from the sky. Astronomers observed significant changes in its light intensity over the past 3 years. This means that Betelgeuse will explode in the sky soon, but no one knows when. When will it happen? The light from the explosion will rival that of the moon, and the explosion will be visible even during the day for several days in a row. However, be careful. The moment we see the explosion in the sky is not the moment when the star exploded. However, be careful. Because Betelgeuse is 500 light years away, the explosion actually happened 500 years before the moment we see it in the sky. That's why it's possible that the star Betelgeuse has already exploded in the sky, but we still see the star today because the light from the explosion hasn't reached us yet. Everything we see is just the image of the star, exactly as Eminescu said, we see it today as well. If the poem To the Star doesn't contain elements of the theory of relativity, what do you say about the poem The Morning Star? Let's read The Morning Star. In his sky wings grew, and paths of thousands of years passed in just as many moments. A sky of stars below him, above him a sky of stars. He seemed like an unending lightning bolt wandering among them. What do you mean? And thousands of years passed in moments? This implies a journey of thousands of light years that for Lucifer takes only moments. In the theory of relativity, the effect is called time dilation. The closer we travel to the speed of light, the slower time will pass for us. Thus, we will be able to travel distances of thousands of light years while still remaining young. However, upon closer inspection, that's not what happened with Luciferul. He did not travel thousands of light years at a speed close to the speed of light. Since this way, the journey would have taken thousands of years, though for him, only moments. When he returned, Luciferul would have found Catalina 2 meters underground, where she lay buried. However, the poem says that for Catalina, only days or weeks had passed. That is why Luciferul did not travel at the speed of light, but at a speed that far exceeded the speed of light. And that is not possible according to the theory of relativity. Others, however, claim that time dilation and the twin paradox can still be found in the novella Por Dionis. Here's what it says there. You must understand that then we have to part forever, because in the desired spaces, a day will be a century, and when you return, you will no longer find Reuben, but another man similar to me, whom you will easily find. What do you mean? In those places, a day equals a century? Do you remember the movie Interstellar? How the astronauts spent a few hours near the black hole while several years passed far away? This is an effect of time dilation predicted by Einstein. Around massive objects, time passes more slowly. The same thing happens in the spaces visited by the Eminescu traveler. There, a day is like a century. When he returns to the places of departure where he is, Reuben, centuries must have passed, so Reuben is either much older or has changed into something else. This time, let's admit it, Eminescu had the right intuition. The novella Por Dionis also has other elements that fit very well with Einstein's thinking. Here, for example, is the paragraph. Let us imagine the world reduced to the size of a bullet and everything in it diminished. By analogy, the inhabitants of that world, assuming they are equipped with our organs, they would understand everything absolutely in the way and proportions that we do. Let us imagine, on a grand scale, the same thing, with changed proportions. A word on a grand scale and another on a tiny scale would be for us just as great. And the objects they see, how big are they absolutely? Who knows if we are not living in a microscopic world and only the structure of our eyes makes us see it at the size we see it. Eminescu clearly tells us that in a universe where we have no reference for length, we don't know if an object is big or small. Without an absolute reference, space is relative. Here's an idea that underpins arithmetic logic unit Einstein's theory of relativity. Einstein differed from Eminescu by relying on logic, mathematics, and experiments in his work. But those things also set his limits. In poetry, however, Eminescu could only be stopped by the power of imagination. Wanting to understand what time is, for example, Eminescu allowed himself to go with his thoughts where mathematics hasn't reached even today. Please listen to the following verses from the poem, "With tomorrow you add to your days." Adding tomorrows extends your days. Dwelling on yesterday's shortens your life. Having with all this always before you the day of today. From every passing moment I understand this truth, that it supports all eternity and turns the whole universe. The moment supports eternity. Here is a profound poetic intuition whose truth we still do not fully understand even today. Could it be that all of history is just a moment? Eminescu expresses this through Por Dionis' thoughts. A mathematical point is lost in the boundlessness of his disposition. A moment of time in its infinitesimal indivisibility which never ceases. In these atoms of space and time, how much infinity. Here the word atoms can refer to something infinitesimally small, but it also suggests the idea of discreteness. Amir counted, just as Pythagoras imagined, that space is a collection of discrete points, which he called monads. In this interpretation by Eminescu, space and time would be discrete and not continuous, a concept present in modern loop quantum gravity theory. This theory unites Einstein's theory of relativity with quantum mechanics, assuming that not only space is discrete, but time as well. These modern theories of quantum gravity tell us that at the microscopic level, space-time would be like a kind of quantum foam. We can't imagine them like soap bubbles that are mostly empty because there is no space and time there. In modern theories of inflation, a universe can be born from this quantum foam. For example, somewhere in the distance of our universe, the inflaton field has quantum fluctuations in this quantum foam, and at some point they cause the expansion of space. Simply put, one of the tiny bubbles of space rapidly inflates, generating a big bang. In this way, a new one is born, right inside our universe. In those distant regions, on the other hand, our observable universe would have also appeared like this from the quantum foam of a previous universe. Notice how many words and modern ideas I used 170 years after the poet's birth. Here is how Eminescu seems to suggest that quantum foam in just a few verses in another poem. When the morning star seeks immortality at the universe's birthplace, he arrives where no boundary or eyes exist. And time tries in vain to be born from voids. Time tries to be born from voids. Are those voids the quantum foam of space-time from which a universe with its own time is born? Eminescu's intuition, which reaches as far as modern concepts of quantum mechanics, can also be found in the poem A Rock of Life. Here are some verses. For a long time I have not listened to the words of the world. What is much for it is nothing to me. The future is a past that I see turned back. The same threads of passions have been spun and respun. The message is one of regret. For thousands of years, people do not change for the better. Still, let's reread the verse. The future is a past that I see turned back. What does it mean to see the future turned back like a past? Is that even possible? The answer is yes. So physicists noticed something strange. Positrons, the antiparticles of the electron, can be interpreted as electrons moving backward in time. Let's say we're looking at a positron that's standing still. We look at it now, a minute later, an hour later. This positron is actually an electron coming from the future. That's why, as time passes, we're actually seeing the electron's past, the future. A past that I see reversed. Incredible intuition. Simply put, if we look only at antimatter, we see a reversed future, in other words, a past of antimatter. But what do you say about another modern concept like that of the multiverses? Here it is, hidden in the poem Venus and Madonna, Ideal, lost in the night of a world that no longer exists. A world that dreamed in fairy tales and spoke poetically. Oh, I see you, I hear you, I ponder you, young and sweet message. From a sky with other stars, with other heavens, with other gods. What do you mean? From a sky with other stars, with other heavens, with other gods. What could skies with other stars be, if not other universes? In a multiverse, the world is now wondering if physicists' theories about multiverses are scientific theories. How can we know what's really in the other universes if we can never get there? How can we believe that we'll understand what's there just by measuring what's here? Could it be that we've reached our limits, just as Eminescu warned us almost a century and a half ago in the poem At the Death of Neamsu? We're racking our brains in vain. Sad souls, visionaries, we read from the book of the world, signs we did not write, we try to fit the sequence of visions, thoughts on some kind of system. We measure the machine of the world with that measure, and our thoughts are just ghosts. And life is a dream. Humanity cannot escape the desire to understand the cosmos, even if it's just a dream. And when we reach our limits, when we see that mathematics fails us, we want to feel, even for a fraction of a second, the greatness of creation. Then we leave the formulas behind and return to poetry. And where is the creation of the cosmos described more beautifully than in letter 1? Suddenly a speck moves alone. Watch how it emerges from chaos to become first the mother, then the father. That moving speck, much weaker than a grain of foam, is the endless thread stretched over the edges of the world. How beautiful, what a symphony! Each word falls into its place like instruments in an orchestra, and each letter fits like a musical note. We see how creation, in Eminescu's vision, is astonishingly similar to the Big Bang. In its initial form, his theories show, but suddenly a point moves. The point Eminescu talks about is the observable universe, its beginning, when everything we see in the sky was squeezed into a space smaller than the tip of a pin. Once again, Eminescu had the intuition of Einstein's theories, whose consequence is the Big Bang. Of course, he was not guided by mathematical theories, but most likely he was influenced by philosophical ideas of creation. From nothing, creatio ex nihilo, as it is also called, even the Christian Bible describes how the Creator made the entire cosmos out of nothing. Eminescu tried to imagine how it might have happened, and the verses are the result of this imagination. Moreover, we know how, in this poem, he used the visions about cosmic origins from the hymn of creation that opens the Rig Veda. Attention, physics only explains what happened after the Big Bang, but Eminescu tries to imagine what was before. This is unimaginable for the human mind, and this can be seen in the apophatic forms that Eminescu creates. Apophatism is a way of approaching divine transcendence, consisting in saying what God is not rather than what He is. Apophatic forms are often used in mythology, theology, and poetry to suggest what is ineffable and cannot be defined. Here is the form constructed by Eminescu. In the beginning, when there was neither being nor non-being, when everything was devoid of life and will, when nothing was hidden, although everything was concealed. Extraordinarily beautiful. So that it could then continue. For there was a darkness, like a sea without light, and within itself, in sin, eternal peace reigned. The existence of darkness like a sea suggests the presence of an empty space, which of course was not the case. For in Einstein's version, time and space were created at the Big Bang. That's why we can't say that Eminescu discovered the Big Bang before Einstein, but only that he resonated with an intuition from the Hindu methodology of the Vedas and expressed it extraordinarily beautifully in the words of the Romanian language. The first moments after the Big Bang are described very well, perhaps surprisingly, in the poem Luceafărul. Here, Luceafărul goes to the creator of the cosmos to ask him to be immortal. The journey to that place is described by comparison to the first day. And from the valley of chaos all around he saw himself as on the first day, how light sprang forth the first day. This is of course the Big Bang, which Eminescu sees as full of chaos, from which much light emerges. But that's how it is. Let's remember how indeed, right after the Big Bang, the cosmos was chaotic. Elementary particles hadn't yet managed to combine into atoms and were running chaotically from one side to another, constantly colliding with each other. Or, as Eminescu's verses say, "From chaos, Lord, I appeared and I would return to chaos." Because they had electric charges and were accelerated in motion, the particles emitted a lot of electromagnetic radiation, meaning light. Exactly as Eminescu says. This light was emitted and absorbed continuously by particles until the year 300,000 when atoms formed. Since these were electrically neutral, they no longer emitted electromagnetic radiation, and the light that already existed began to travel freely through the universe. Due to the expansion of space, the wavelength of the light increased, and this ancient light entered the microwave range. Today, we can see part of it as the static on cathode ray tube televisions. It's called background radiation. That's why whenever we read Luceafărul, we should remember that its verses hide the poet's intuition about the first radiation of the cosmos, the background radiation. Let's continue the first letter with the poetic description of the end of the solar system, the sun. What is proud today, he sees as sad and red, how it closes like a wound among dark clouds, how all the planets freeze and spin wildly into space, freed from the brakes of light and the grip of the sun. We see how Eminescu is right once again, because indeed the sun will be red at the end of its life. However, it does not go out. On the contrary, it will grow and swallow the Earth, becoming a red giant. That's why some planets, like the Earth, won't freeze but will burn inside this red giant. After a while, in the place of the sun, a white dwarf will form, meaning a smoldering ember. What will happen to the planets that survive? The most distant ones, Jupiter, Neptune, Uranus, will not escape the gravitational pull of the white dwarf because it is still massive, having half the mass of the sun. Eminescu's love for science is found not only in his poems but also in his manuscripts. Among them, the most surprising is manuscript number 2267, which contains, believe it or not, the well-known Einstein equation E equals mc squared. Here is what this manuscript says. So, 5 to the power of falling is equal to m times d, the mass multiplied by the elevation, or equal to m times c squared, the mass multiplied by the final speed squared. We see how in Eminescu's manuscript the equation appears as 5 equals mc squared. To understand the meaning of the terms, we read in the manuscript that the magnitude of falling power 5 is directly proportional to both mass m and elevation d. In other words, if we lift a body of mass m to the height d, it will have a falling power proportional to m and d. However, we know from mechanics that the potential energy of a body of mass m raised to the height d is mass times gravity times distance. So the falling power 5 is actually the potential energy, which we can denote as E. Then, In Eminescu's manuscript, we have the formula E equals mc squared, where c is the river, the final step, meaning the velocity. Seeing these relationships, physics teacher Iwan Kampan suggested that the above relation is actually Einstein's equation. Especially since, as Professor Kampan says, the final velocity c should be interpreted as the maximum speed an object can have, that is, the speed of light c. Could it be so? Could Eminescu have discovered the famous formula E equals mc squared several decades before Einstein? Professor Kampan says it was only in the manuscript. The hypothesis exploded into the public space in 2016 when György Fonar made it public and accused Einstein of fraud. But is it so? I didn't immediately find a complete answer to the whole story, so I started looking myself to see what the truth is. Especially since now I have seen with my own eyes that the relationship really exists in Eminescu's manuscript. It wasn't hard for me to find the truth starting from the very title of the manuscript, which is F.R. Meyer, Observation on the Power of Inanimate Nature. Thus, the title shows us that Eminescu's test is a translation of an article by Robert Meyer, who lived several decades before Eminescu. Meyer was a well-known surgeon in Germany who discovered the first principle of thermodynamics, the law of conservation of energy. During his stay in Berlin, Eminescu attended the lectures of Hermann Helmholtz, who was also pursuing the same principle of conservation of energy. And with him, he found Robert Meyer's article. I also searched for Meyer's original article and found it on the internet. It wasn't hard for me to see that Eminescu's manuscript is a word-for-word translation of Robert Meyer's article. It was published almost 10 years before Eminescu began his studies. So there's no question of Eminescu's priority. If there is any priority, it should belong to Robert Meyer. Still, the mystery felt unsolved to me, because in Meyer's article, the same formula E equals mc squared appears before Einstein was born. However, Meyer's article clarifies the terms. Thus, here you can clearly see how c is not the maximum speed of objects in the cosmos, meaning the speed of light, but rather the final speed that a massive object has. M is in free fall. The equation E equals mc squared should then be read as the kinetic energy that a body has in free fall, when its speed is c, or if we denote the final speed with 5, the energy would be E equals m, 5 squared. Now, however, any student who goes through high school physics knows that the kinetic energy of a body is E equals mv squared divided by 2. Did Robert Meyer miss the factor of 2? The answer is yes, and that's the last piece of the step. Indeed, the value of kinetic energy was not known precisely in Meyer's time. The factor of 2 missing in Meyer's work was discovered only 10 years earlier by physicist Rudolf Clausius. On one hand, Meyer was not aware of this factor of 2. On the other hand, he was a surgeon who was less familiar with the mathematical tools of physics. That's how Meyer ignored a factor of 2. So how far did he get? An equation identical to Einstein's is written, which will later appear in Eminescu's manuscript, long before Einstein discovered it. Pure coincidence. The connection between Eminescu and Einstein doesn't end here. Even though the formula E equals mc squared is not Eminescu's creation, another connection exists, and it bears the name of a young woman, Melania Sherwood. In 1928, she was living in Brasov and was fascinated both by Eminescu's poetry and by the theory of relativity developed by Einstein. Melania recognizes the concepts of relativity in the work Sarmanul Kionis, which she mentioned. Under their impression, Melania gathers her courage and writes directly to Einstein with the simple address Albert Einstein, Berlin. She translates the poet's words into German and asks him to help her understand. To her surprise, the letter reaches Einstein, who for the first time comes into contact with Eminescu almost half a century after the poet's death. Through the ages, the two shake hands. A physicist and a poet, each with his own way of understanding the world and representing the cosmos and the human within it. Einstein not only reads Melania's letter, but also answers her frankly. Dear Miss Sherwood, do you think that the passages quoted from the novella have any connection with this theory? However, without knowledge of physics, the theory of relativity cannot be understood. In other words, if the poet and the physicist are united in the search for the meaning of the cosmos and of life, they are still separated by their method. The physicist uses the pencil to write equations, while the poet uses the same pencil to write verses and evoke emotion. The correspondence between Melania Scherbo and Einstein then continues for decades, with Melania being helped to follow the path of physics. Einstein even ends up writing to Nicolae Iorga, suggesting that he change the country's laws to allow a larger group of students to pursue university studies. As was the case with Melania, impressed by the letter, Iorga actually does this. In the end, Melania fulfills her dream and becomes a physics teacher in Israel. I'll be honest, every time I read Einstein's equations, I'm amazed by the order our brain sees in the universe. Every time I read Eminescu's verses, I get goosebumps because it makes me sense what physics cannot describe. Here's how Eminescu himself says it in the poem Only the Poet. The whole world is fleeting, people pass away and die like thousands before them. From somewhere a soul returns, endlessly traversing the bosom of the infinite sea. Only the poet, like a bird flying above the waves, passes over the infinity of time, into the branches of thought, into the holy heights, where birds like him compete in songs. And with these verses, my story comes to an end. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe or turn on the notification bell. Because, as you have seen, I can't keep my promise to make a video every week. This way, however, if you subscribe, you'll find it easier to catch one of my future videos, which otherwise are quickly forgotten. Just as Mihai Eminescu himself says, oblivion closes in writing with the hand in the high school light. Goodbye. Because in Einstein's variation, in the version Who am I? How am I?